Faith Nicole. Hello. So, I'm making this video because I'm too lazy to type all this out. And if I use voice to text, I know you don't like it because I don't include a lot of punctuation. So, I was thinking about when we were at graduation for Kieran, and I showed you a picture of my mom, and you said she looked mean in that photo. Well, I told you what she said was, hurry up and take the damn photo. Well, I feel like I should go into detail just a little bit about that so you know something about what was happening. Okay? This was about 2 years before I met your mom. It was 1985. And that was the year Mrs. Carter died. We were living in her house at 1020 Main Street, and my mother took care of her. But quite often, Miss Carter was in the hospital for many months at a time, and we were there by ourselves. By this time, I had graduated from high school. I had started college and pretty much had dropped out of college. I was really interested in photography. I had been interested in photography my whole life, from before I was under 10 years old. I had little, 110 viewfinder cameras, and I even had a disc camera that came out late 70s, early 80s. At some point, they had 15 exposures, and it was a little round disc. And by 85, I finally got my hands on a 35 millimeter SLR. And so, the wall behind my mother in that photo was the actual wallpaper. And I didn't have any professional type backdrops. So what I did was I moved the furniture out of the way of this wall, and I said, Mama, I want you to sit in this chair in front of this wall, and I'm going to take some pictures of you. And I just want to practice my photography. And that's really what it was that day. It was a practice session. And I took dozens and dozens of photos of her, many of which she was smiling in. But the photo you're familiar with is the only surviving photo. And I feel sad about that, but shit happened in my life that caused me to lose track of those photos. But I had so many different camera lenses. I had a big blue old style tripod that I had bought from a professional photographer that had upgraded, so he sold me his tripod. And even back then, this was an expensive thing that I had purchased. And I had a little shutter release cord that, I would just kind of look through the lens and step back and say, okay, ready, go. And then I'd press it, and it would take the picture. You can still use these types of devices today with modern photography equipment, which a lot of modern photography equipment is digital, but a lot of the old style film cameras still exist. So anyway, at that time, it was all film. There was no digital. So you had to buy rolls of 35 millimeter film. You had to put it in the camera. You had to stretch the film over to the leader. And you used to have to manually insert it and wind it in there. But I had what was at the time a very modern camera. You just pulled it over, and there's a little red mark there. Pulled it over that far, and you closed the camera back. It automatically advanced the film to the first frame. There was no preview. None. You took your chances. So you had to kind of know what you were doing with the camera settings. There was a program mode back then. It had just come out. But a real photographer would work with setting your own aperture, which is the opening and closing of the lens to let in a certain amount of light, and the shutter speed, how fast the shutter or how long the shutter would stay open to allow in light. And you'd have to learn how to balance those two. And also, film had speeds. The average film speed was around 100 to 200. but just depending on what you were doing, it could go all the way up to 1,000, 1,600. Those higher speed films are usually like for sports and race car driving, so you could take a picture of a race car on a track and it would like freeze it. If you did it with regular film, you'd just see a streak. Also, there are different types of film. Like, there's tungsten film, which was really good if you were photographing something on the inside, and you wouldn't get this yellowish light that comes from incandescent light bulbs. So if you used regular film, you'd get that yellowish light, and so you didn't want to use that. You used the tungsten film. And of course, there was slide film, so you could take a roll of slide film, take it to the publishers or the developers, and they'd give you actual slides that you could put in a slide projector. Those were the days before PowerPoint. Most people didn't have a home computer. Some did, but they were very primitive compared to what came out even by the 90s. So at this point, I was playing around with all this photographic equipment. I was putting on different lenses, different lens filters, most of which, did things just like filter out UV light. But some were color lenses to just might take a whole photo of something in orange or blue or red. I even had a lens that would fit over and it divided the image into 3 separate images. Some were like 1, 2, 3. Some were 1, 2, 3. Some were like red, green, blue. And I was playing around with all this because that's what I was trying to do, was practice and use this equipment and learn how to use it while practicing. And I was looking at books too. I had instruction manuals, for certain effects that I wanted to do. So, I was taking pictures of my mother, and she was, she was okay with it, But you got to remember, my mom was a smoker, and at that time I was too. My mom was a serious smoker. She couldn't go more than 5 or 10 minutes without lighting a cigarette. And I had been messing around for like an hour, taking various photographs, and, slowly but surely she began to get a little impatient, And at first it was just like, how much longer is it going to be? I said, well, I just got to try this one more thing. I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at the settings on the camera and everything. I'm looking at the lighting because I didn't have any lighting equipment. I didn't even have a real light meter, but I did have a light meter that I could see through the lens of the camera. It was a newer, more advanced camera. Now it would be considered probably a primitive camera, but the first camera that I had was a Canon T70. And I also had a Minolta X700, and I had a Minolta Maxim, which was the first autofocus camera. And these things cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I had $2,000 or $3,000 in photography equipment, and my mother was hoping that somehow I could make some money because we had spent a lot of money on this equipment, and here I am playing with all these things, and all she wants to do is get it over with so she can have a cigarette break. And so by this time, she's not too happy. She's sitting there after an hour of not having a cigarette, with me not exactly taking pictures. I'm taking pictures, but I'm adjusting things. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold up a second, I'm trying to figure out this, or I want to try this, hold up a minute, And so she's sitting there. And I said, okay, Mom, straighten up, look straight ahead, smile. Finally, by the time that photo was taken, I'm messing around with the controls of the camera and everything, and setting and trying different light settings, and trying to make it so that there's no shadow behind her on the wall, just trying to figure this out. even though I had expensive camera equipment, I didn't have any real lighting equipment or backdrops or anything like I said, because that would have been thousands and thousands of more dollars. So I was trying to figure out the best way I could to make do. This is why I do outdoor photography to this day, because I didn't have, and I still don't have, the money to invest in, having a room set up just for indoor photography. Okay, so by the time I took that picture, I'm getting everything set up, and she was just like, "Will you hurry up and take the damn picture?" And I'm like, oh, sure, yeah, hold up, yeah, ready, okay. She's not ready to smile. She's ready for me to take the picture and go smoke a cigarette. Mind you, she's got one of her best dresses on, which she would have never smoked in because she was worried about cigarette burns and things like that. But as soon as that picture was over, she hightailed it downstairs to the kitchen where she could light up a cigarette, because that was where she could smoke. And I don't know how it happened, but that's the one that looked the most professional. Even though she was not smiling, she wasn't being mean. She had just grown impatient with me, because in her life experience, when you take a picture, you go chick, snip, slip, snip, slip, slip. And you've taken photos. And here I am messing around with all this equipment that she had no idea, anything about. And it was like an hour. So it was an incredibly long period of time for her. She didn't understand. She had never even seen a 35 millimeter SLR before. So I think you could probably identify with that, because I remember you telling me that you didn't know anything about this photography equipment that I've used in the past. And I will tell you that I still don't. To this day, sometimes I get confused with the settings on these cameras, because now they're all different. They're a lot more advanced than they used to be, and they're all digital. So yes, you can get a preview, but still some things are off, i.e. the problems we had photographing you over on Park Avenue that time, where I had a setting that I couldn't figure out how to fix, and I actually didn't get it fixed till after we had finished pretty much the photography. I think I got one picture of you and Kieran where it was fixed, but one of the pictures turned out pretty cool. It was a different effect, and I like it to this day. I don't know if you remember the one I'm talking about or not. Anyway, I wanted to explain that. I know it's taken me 13 minutes to get to it, but look, I am a storyteller, and maybe that's why I got into history. And I have a lot of stories that I want to share about things that happened in my life, and this was one of them. So don't think about the fact that she looks mean in that photo. Think about the fact that she was a heavy smoker, and she'd gone over an hour without a cigarette, and she was waiting for me to take a picture, and she had no clue why I was fiddling around with all this equipment. Why didn't I just say cheese and snap the picture? So that's that story. I thought I'd share it with you. I hope you've had time to watch this video, and maybe it can tell you a little something about your great or your grandmother. Is she your grandmother or your great? Oh, she's your grandmother. Yeah. Believe it or not, she's actually a good woman. She had her faults like we all do, right? All right. Bye.